Welcome everyone to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. We are continuing our series on War and Peace in Jewish tradition. Where I'm going to start tonight is close to where we left off last time. Last time, we analyzed the word shalom, and especially the idea that the first letter is a shin, which is the letter of fire, Aish, and the last letter, the mem, which is a letter of water. And throughout the series, we've been discussing this idea of peace being a unity of opposites. And we saw that same thing in Shemayim. The shin of Shemayim is Eish, and then the word Mayim is water. And this is a theme we've been following throughout, that to make shalom doesn't mean that everyone gives up their identity. Everyone gives up their own uniqueness. But shalom is when two opposites can coexist in harmony. And so I'm not sure if I pointed this out, but it is fairly important that the same root for the word shalom is shalem, which means whole, complete. And so that's a very important connection to shalom, is it's a feeling or an experience of completeness. And this is especially true on Shabbat. There's a teaching in the Gemara that I have to think about this a little bit. I hadn't been prepared to say this, but so in the seventh day of creation, Shabbat, it says God rested from everything that he did. And he completed everything that he had done, he completed. So this is already a hint to this idea of shalom, is a feeling of completeness. And it says that he completed everything, and all the host of heaven. So the Gemara says, don't read it Siva'am, read it Sivyonam. Don't read it that God completed the heavens and the earth and all their host. Siva'am is all their host. Read it in, and here's the question. In the Gemara, there's a number of different opinions. What does it mean, Sivyonam? Well, it's connected to the word color, Seva, and it's connected to the idea of uniqueness. Sivyonam is in their unique pattern, unique energy, their unique manifestation. So it's a teaching from Rav Ginsburg that, and then the Gemara continues by alluding to a very deep thing. I remember in our series on Shabbat, we learned this in depth, that Sivyonam alludes to the idea that every being had a say in their own creation. It's a very, very deep concept that before we came into this world, we actually had a say of who we were going to be, what our challenges were going to be, even what parents, what country. There's this idea that we have a part. And so Rav Ginsburg said it's really an awesome thing. I try to think of it going into every Shabbat. He said the secret of Shabbat is in this concept, we call it sivyonam. Everyone according to their very being. And he said that the secret of Shabbat is that since we were a part of choosing the type of person that we would be, that to really enjoy Shabbat, we have to really be whole with who we are and what our circumstances in life are. Because you can imagine if you go into Shabbat and you're not happy with yourself, you're not happy with your circumstances, you're not happy with your job, perhaps you're not happy with your relationships, you're not happy with your relationship with God. Well, how good of a Shabbat can it be? Let's be honest. We'll go through the motions, but I'm not really happy with anything. So Rav Ginsburg said this word, called Sivyonam, God completed. So he said, for us to go into Shabbat, we have to feel complete with the circumstances of our life because it's our free will that put us here. Let's, for a second, forget this idea before we came into the world, we had a say. But what about in this world? We have free will. So if we chose to go into a certain profession, we chose a certain place to live, we chose a spouse, we chose friends, we chose a shul, whatever, put it all together, and to really enjoy Shabbat, it's like, yeah, I have to be complete at peace with my decision making. And so I try to remember that going into every Shabbat. We're all human. We all have our ups and downs, but it's a deep realization. So I'm bringing all of that just to point out that the word shalom is connected to the word shalem, whole, complete, at peace with the circumstances of our life. Now, another thing is, and I think it was already in the discussion group afterwards, I can't remember, someone read from a book describing peace. And the whole idea was this idea of feeling complete. That's what peace is, feeling complete and in the moment. Okay, maybe 5 minutes from now, I won't feel complete. But to experience peace, now I remember the piece that the person read was the idea that in a certain way, we can only feel a certain amount of peace as an individual. There's a certain kind of peace that is waiting for the entire world to be in a state of peace. Now we could have it's like a ripple effect. I could be at peace with myself, maybe not at peace with anything outside of me, but with myself, I'm at peace. So we call that like a little bit of peace. I'm at peace with my family. I'm at peace with my community. I'm at peace with my religious affiliation. I'm at peace with all of my neighbors. Israel someday will be peace with the whole world. It's like a ripple effect. But the idea that the person read, and maybe later someone will put in the chats and remind us exactly what it was. The idea that real peace is only going to be when the entire world is at peace. That will be a completeness that we're lacking now. We're definitely lacking. Okay, now I want to pursue in a slightly different way this idea that making peace and experiencing peace is this idea of unifying opposites. That is the essence of peace. And so there's a number of concepts that I want to bring up here. These are concepts that we've learned before, but maybe not in this context. And so I'm going to bring up 3 or 4, and we'll see their importance here. The first one I'm bringing out is what Rav Ginsburg calls the most mystical word in the entire Tanakh, and that is chashmal. Chashmal, which today is called in Hebrew electricity, translated as electricity. It comes from a vision of Ezekiel. It's only mentioned 3 times, all in the vision of Ezekiel, where he sees it's really an energy. Sometimes it's interpreted as a brilliant color, but it's an energy. That's why electricity is an excellent translation for chashmal. And we're told that the word chashmal is paradoxical because the chash means silent and mal means speaking. So this is the paradox of what we'll call the sounds of silence, or probably where Simon and Garfunkel got it from is the whole story of Eliyahu Navi, when he escapes to the Sinai for his life. The king and queen are killing all of the prophets, and he has this whole mystical experience with God. And at first he thinks God is in like an earthquake or in a fire or in a huge wind. But each time it says, but God was not in these things. And then Eliyahu heard, called Mama Daka. He heard a thin, silent voice. So that's chashmal. He heard a silent voice. And I believe it was last week's class that actually it could have been the Parsha class, but we learned that there's a voice that is heard, and there's a voice of the heart that is not audibly heard, but it's as real as a heard voice. It's the silent voice of the heart. So we have these 2 opposites, chash, mal, silence and speech. And this in many ways represents all opposites. And that's why when you put them together, you do have a unity. You have a speaking silence. Usually we think of speaking as opposite of silence. But there is this reality of a speaking silence, or kol demama daka, a thin, silent voice. Now, the reason I'm bringing this is as you'll see right now, it's a very, very important idea. The Baal Shem Tov, he made a important general idea, and he said, anytime you have 2 opposites, and the idea is unity. God is one, everything is one. Nonetheless, our initial experience of reality is based on duality. We see that from the first letter of the Torah, the big bet of Bereshit. Our experience of reality is very dualistic. But our, call it task or mission or job, is to see the oneness behind everything. So the Baal Shem Tov said, anytime you have two opposites, there has to be a middle intermediary stage that will bring them together. This is an important teaching from the Baal Shem Tov. So how did he apply it to Chashmal? So he said we should read it Chash Mal Mal. Why? Because Mal, which we interpreted as speaking, has another meaning. And that is from Brit Milah. That means to separate, to cut off. Milah. So here he took the word chashmal and he said, in order to have that unity, you have to have this intermediary. And that is chashmal mal. And this is an example of the bigger teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. It happens to be one that Rav Ginsburg has picked up on very, very, very much and includes it in many of his teachings. Over the years, I would say hundreds and hundreds of times. And that is, most of you will recognize this, Hachna'ah, Havdalah, Hamtaka. Hachna'ah is submission, Havdalah is separation, and Hamtaka is sweetening. So the Baal Shem explains every process goes through these three stages. And like I said, in either lectures from Rav Ginsburg or his books, I have read or heard him apply this to hundreds of different realities or processes. Hachna'ah, Havdalah, and Hamtaka. And this is a completeness. That's what I'm trying to get to here, is that if we're saying that shalom is really bringing two opposites together, well, how is that done? Well, we need a middle intermediary force that will bring them together. And so for those who aren't familiar, hachna'ah means submission. What this means is, imagine any task that a person wants to undertake. It could be a task of literally a minute, a week, a month, a year, or 10 years. It doesn't matter. It could be spiritual or it could be physical. If I want to accomplish any task, I have to submit myself to the task. That's submission. In other words, I can say, I want to accomplish X, but I'm not really serious, and I make no attempt to actually do it. I would like to lose weight, but I don't do anything. I don't exercise more. I don't eat less. I don't change my diet. I don't do anything. So nothing has happened. There's no hachna'ah. There's no submitting myself to the task at hand. The middle stage is havdalah, separation. What this means is once I've taken upon myself to accomplish a task, my thought process will be a continual, what's called birur, clarification of what will help me accomplish the task and what will take me away from accomplishing the task. And that's what's called separation. I have to separate between what is, we'll call it positive and negative in relationship to this task. And this is an ongoing, as long as the task is going, I'm constantly, what can I do to accomplish this quicker, better, easier, and what will be a total distraction. And then you get to hamtaka, sweetening. And that is when we accomplish the task, then it has to be an attitude of, first of all, of thanking Hashem for the energy, the wisdom, the opportunity, the good fortune of accomplishing it. And just as important, to be happy with the final product. How many times in life we do something, small or big, and we put a lot of effort into it, and we come to the final product and we look and go, "Oy, that's not what I had in mind," right? I mean, there's some people who spend years picking out a profession, and then somewhere along the line, it's like, this is not what I had in mind. This is not it. So the sweetening is being happy with what you've accomplished. It's very connected to what we said about going into Shabbat. If I'm not basically happy with my life, how do I expect to enjoy Shabbat? So this idea of three stage process could be chash mal mal, it could be hachna'ah, havdalah, hamtaka, or it could be the secret of the sfirot. We're told that in the previous world, there are two different versions of how the sfirot constructed themselves. Either in circles, each one of the circles is one of the sfirot, or, I don't have a figure here, is in either one line, like 10 rungs on a ladder, or 2 rungs. This is in world Olam HaTohu. And it's revealed in the Zohar that the secret of this world, the secret of Olam HaTikun, is our usual conception of the Sfirot in 3 lines. In other words, if you take away the 3 lines, the middle line, you would have the concept of what we call yin and yang, 2 opposites. Now, this is not a value judgment. There's nothing wrong with the symbol yin yang. Yin yang has its own essential meaning. But what the Zohar was revealing, there's something deeper than the acknowledgement of opposites. And that is by introducing the middle line that puts everything together. So if you look at this carefully, all of a sudden you'll see this is actually the secret of the Magen David. The whole secret of the Magen David is really the secret of peace. Is because if you look carefully, you have a series of triangles. Many different triangles all over the place. I assume everyone is able to follow this. You see how many different triangles there are? And this is the idea of putting together opposites in order to create peace. The other way we could look at it is a very well-known idea, and that is what's called thesis, antithesis, synthesis. These, you're going to be stuck with opposites. But once you put the third middle point, that brings synthesis, that brings shalom. So these, we could get into, much deeper, but these are all ideas that we've been developing the whole series, but I wanted to bring in different reference points to this idea of uniting opposites. And so really, the Magen David, this is a classic example where you have two completely opposite triangles, one pointing upward, the other one pointing downward. But when you put them together, it creates only one form, one symbol. But if you look, it's really made up of two absolutely opposite forces. And so that's the idea of the completeness, is to be able to take opposites and put them together without each of the opposites losing their unique independence or energy or form. That's the idea of peace. Last week, we talked about shalom bayit, peace in the home. Well, peace in the home is not really made from one of the partners in the marriage always feeling like they have to give up what's important to them for the sake of the other person. That will not lead to shalom bayit. Shalom bayit is when each of the pairs have their opinions, have their needs, have their desires, have their wants, and the shalom bayit comes through the dialogue, through compromise, through discussion, and that's where the shalom bayit comes from. So when we talk about shalom bayit, we're not talking about one of the partners being subservient to the other. That's far from shalom, far from peace in the home. So peace in the home is going to be made from everyone getting as much as humanly possible their needs met. And this does take a lot of giving. A lot of times we do have to give up what we want in order to make the other happy. That's a very legitimate thing. But it doesn't become legitimate when it's all the time and one starts to feel forced to always, in Hebrew, it's mivater, to give up what's important to you for the sake of the other person. Okay, so now that brings us to some new ideas here. And I just used the word, and it's a good lead-in to the idea of compromise. So what I'm going to give over now is based on, it's hard to see the actual words of the cover here. This is a book. It's called Awakening the Spark Within. This is one of the two books that I worked extensively with Rav Ginsburg on. And here it's called, it's very hard to see it, 5 Dynamics of Leadership that Can Change the World. 5 Dynamics of Leadership that Can Change the World. So the whole book is about leadership. And Rav Ginsburg proposes 5 dynamics of a good leader. Now, dynamics aren't necessarily skills. They are skills, but if you would ask today in modern secular culture, what makes a good leader? So most people would say, I'm saying this tongue in cheek, the ability to raise money. You want to run for Senate in America? You better have $20 million in your, what they call it the war chest. I think at this point, to be elected president, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars in a campaign. I said that a little bit tongue in cheek, but people would say a good speaker, a good public speaker, someone who is organized. So again, someone who can raise money. These are like skills that people need in today's world. What Rav Ginsburg is giving over something very, very different. He's giving over soul qualities of a good leader in a Jewish context. So I'm going to mention the 5, but we're only going to go into the first one because that's connected. So the first one is the art of compromise. This is the first on Rav Ginsburg's list. The art of compromise. We'll get into it in a minute. The second one is the drive for wholeness. Again, these are soul qualities that when manifest will create the aura of a leader, the energy of a leader. The third is, give me a second. Let me just see the exact words. The power of compassion to inspire. The power of compassion to inspire. This has a lot to do with Moshe Rabbeinu and his compassion. The fourth one is the drive to integration. And there Rav Ginsburg talks extensively, especially in today's terms, of being able to unify physical and spiritual, to be able to take the best of the secular knowledge and to unify it with Torah wisdom. And the last one is the most enigmatic. It's called the sense of folly, which means a sense of folly or the sense of joy. So I'm going to say them very quickly again. Compromise, the art of compromise, the drive for wholeness. In other words, a leader has to have a vision. And he has to have like a vision that people will buy into. And that vision depends on being able to see a whole picture, to lead people towards a goal that's worth fighting for, sacrificing for, dreaming and believing in. The taking compassion that leads to inspiration. And this just gets into the whole role of compassion in Jewish life, and especially in a Jewish leader. That a leader is driven not by the desire for power, but because they're driven by compassion and they want to fix the world, help the world, heal the world, improve the world, because they have compassion on the state of the world as it is now. The fourth one is the drive for integration. In other words, being well-rounded and being able to use all of the knowledge and wisdom of Torah and science in order to build a better world. And the last one is the sense of folly. In many cases, is the ability to think outside the box. To think outside the box. And the importance of joy in a leader to inspire others. So my whole point here is to get into compromise. Why is that such an important thing? Because here compromise is exactly what we've been talking about. How do you get two different people or two different ideas or two different solutions to a problem, and they're diametrically opposed from each other? But there needs to be peace. If it's peace in the home, well, a family unit, you have, parents and children, and everyone has their own ideas of how things should be run. Well, you have to come to compromise. That means everyone has to try to understand everyone else. Everyone has to be willing to give a little something. That's how you make peace in the home. So that's why I'm going to concentrate here on the idea of compromise, because if we're talking practically, so we could say it's very nice to talk about peace. Well, how do you make peace? How do you get to peace? Well, in many cases, probably most cases, even within a person, within an individual, we have differing needs, differing desires and passions. So how do we make inner peace? Well, we have to find a way that each one of those needs can be fulfilled. So Rav Ginsburg, in the relationship to leadership, so he brings a Rashi in the book of Devarim, after God has told Moshe that you will not be leading Israel into the Holy Land. So Moshe says, please choose a leader, because the people can't be like a flock with no shepherd. So God says, Yoshua. And in the Torah, it says that God says, why Yoshua? It says, because, I don't have it in front of me, Ish sheruach bo. He's a person who has spirit in him. That could be interpreted in many, many different ways. Usually, our picture of Yeshua is not exactly that. Yeshua, up to that point, has been relatively passive. It says about Yeshua that he never moved from the tent of Moshe. He never left Moshe's side. He was subservient in a good way to Moshe. So Rashi tells, what does it mean? He was a person who had spirit in him. So Rashi says he's the type of person that can relate to each and every person and recognizes the spirit in them, and therefore everyone can relate to him. Everyone can relate to him. So that's why Rav Ginsburg picked the art of compromise as the first, we'll call it soul dynamic or soul skill for a leader, because a leader is leading other people. I just read, some of you have heard this, when, it was David Ben-Gurion once met Eisenhower. Eisenhower was president at that time of America, and Ben-Gurion was the prime minister. And they had issues and whatever. But at one point, Eisenhower said, it's really difficult being a president of 170 million people. At that point, Israel probably had about 1 million people. That was it. Eisenhower said, it's very difficult being the president of 170 million people. And so Ben-Gurion said, it's even harder to be a leader of 1 million prime ministers. In other words, everyone here has very strong opinions. So, okay, you have 170 million people, but you only have one president. I'm prime minister, but I have 1 million prime ministers to take care of. So in other words, Rav Ginsburg picked this idea because a leader is leading people. And people, as we know, have such different ideas and concepts and worldviews. Well, how do you bring everyone together? So you offer a vision, you inspire people, you create a sense of joy, you make a plan that will bring the best of society together. Those are the four dynamics. And then you have to know how to get people to compromise. That's the only way you can do it, is you facilitate people willing to compromise. So this idea is like stamped in a world Jewish view. And we could see this very much in the Talmud, in the Jewish way of learning. Whatever the subject at hand is, inevitably, there are going to be many different opinions. The whole Talmud is a record of discussions about different matters, different things where the Jewish law had to be decided. And on any given point, there could be many, many, many different opinions. And so, first of all, the Talmud is unique in the idea. I mean, many have followed this idea, but the Talmud maintains all the different opinions. Even when the halacha is chosen, all the different opinions are still maintained. The most famous statement is, because of the disagreements between the Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. And this is at a time where the normative halacha as we live it today was being formulated, what we call rabbinic Judaism. And so Shammai and Hillel, in almost all cases, held opposite opinions. So they had to make a decision. So they decided in almost every case, except I believe 6 cases between Hillel and Shammai, it always goes by Hillel. But in one of the discussions between Hillel and Shammai, so a voice came from heaven and said, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. These and these are the words of the living God. So we've heard this before, but in the context of what we're trying to understand of shalom, what we're saying is, even when the halakha, Jewish law, is decided according to one of the opinions, we don't discount that there's a point of truth in the other opinions, and they're valuable, and we maintain them to the point that we have a somewhat paradoxical statement that when Mashiach comes, we will then paskin like Beit Shammai. So this is very paradoxical. In other words, for thousands of years, we decide Jewish law according to one of the opinions, and now we're going to decide according to the other. And the way they explain this is because human consciousness will change so radically, and the circumstances and the way we view the world and all of reality will change so dramatically that at that point, the teachings of Beit Shammai will be more appropriate, because there was truth in it all the time. So, and I'll just mention that when you get into the more finer points of halakha, many times, let's say the law is X, and then you're reading the explanations of the application of the law. So many times it's explained, we do it like X, but we keep in mind the opinions of Y, and we do it in a way that Y also, their, what's called svora, their reasoning is at home as well. This is a very beautiful thing. It's a very beautiful thing. And we see this very much in two words, what's called lechatchila and bidiavad, or bidiavad. In other words, in virtually every law, there's what's called the ideal way to keep the law. And then there's what's called after the fact. In other words, Jewish law is very precise, very exacting, and to fulfill a single law, there's sometimes there's like 20 factors or I can't think of the word right now, 20 different perfections that one has to get to do the law exactly right. Well, what happens if you can't do it perfectly? So there could be an opinion, well, don't even attempt it. Either you do it right or you don't do it at all. That's not a Jewish way. No, in other words, virtually every law, there's what's called doing it after the fact. In other words, you can't do it perfectly. You can't even do it nearly perfectly. But because of the circumstances that you're in, you can do most of it, some of it. Then you do the mitzvah. It's called after the fact, and you fulfill the mitzvah. You fulfill the mitzvah because that's the best you could do under the circumstances. Circumstances are always changing, always changing. So this also is in the structure of halakha, the idea that we can do things not ideally is already, in a sense, a compromise. But it's a beautiful compromise because we're human and we're not perfect. So to keep a mitzvah in a perfect way, sometimes you would need a perfect person. Well, we're not perfect. So the law is constructed, and sometimes there are like 10 little details within b'diavad of, if you can't do it this way, well, at least do it that way. And if you can't do it that way, but if you did it this way, you're also good. So virtually all of Jewish law is based on this idea of being able to see different angles of truth, different angles of how we go about living the Torah. Many people say, well, if the law is black and white, what do we need rabbis for? You just have law books, you look up what the law is, and you do it. And in fact, I have to say that was, at least originally, some of the complaints with the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, that he did such a phenomenal job of explaining the halacha. There was a fear no one's going to learn Torah anymore. All you have to do is look at the Mishnah Torah. It tells you what to do. And we don't understand why we do it. We don't understand all the different opinions. We don't understand the development. It tells you what to do, and you do it. But that's not really how we go about things. So since the Mishnah Torah, there's hundreds of halacha books, hundreds, and the details just keep on multiplying in a certain way. Okay, so now I just want to explain one more idea that Rav Ginsburg brings on the idea of compromise. And this is a very, very deep idea. We've talked about the idea of tzimtzum many, many times. The idea when an infinite God, where there's nothing other than God, decides to create a finite universe that will have the appearance and human beings who will have free will. Well, where do you put such a world if everything's infinite? So the Arizal explained the concept of tzimtzum, that God contracted his infinite being and created a vacuum, a so-called empty space. And then into the empty space, he began the process of creation. So there would be, as it were, something outside of God, and then there could be a relationship. So this is a concept we've explained many times. So what does this have to do with compromise and peace? So at least in the beginning, I don't think it's such a raging question now, but when the Arizal passed away and then Rabbi Chaim Vital published the teachings of the Arizal, there was a huge question. Did the Arizal mean that God literally contracted in a way that there was no what's called reshimu, no impression of godliness in this vacuum? Or was it only from our point of view that God had contracted himself? From God's point of view, there was no contraction, as it were, at all. So this is what's called tzimtzum kipshuto, or tzimtzum eino kipshuto. Is this literal contraction or conceptual or symbolic or metaphorical contraction? And among the Kabbalists, there was actually a great debate. So Rav Ginsburg tries to explain that if you hold that it was a true contraction, and God is, as it were, outside of this vacuum. Okay, later God shines the ray of light that all of creation comes from. But if there was a time where there was no presence of God, this sets up the reality of a dualistic world. Because then it's God is there and God isn't there. In other words, if you take this to its logical end, then God, as it were, withdrew from the world. And there's only a semblance of godliness in the world. But if you look at the Tzimtzum Lo Pshuto, that it's only from our viewpoint, our perspective, and there was always a reshimu, there was always an impression of godliness, then this sets the stage for the ability to understand oneness. So Rav Ginsburg applies this to the idea of compromise. Because he says that there are people who don't have an art of compromise, who don't have this skill or this sense. It's kind of like me against the world. Something is either right or it's wrong. Don't tell me like Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. Don't tell me this and this are the words of the living God. Here we're talking about paradox. So Rav Ginsburg is trying to explain that if you hold that the Tzimtzum is literal, then there's no way to unify paradox. Everything will remain either God is there or he's not there. He's immanent or he's transcendent. Don't tell me it's both. But if you understand that Tzimtzum, and this is all of the Chassidus, especially from the Baal Shem Tov onward, all of Chassidut goes according to the opinion, which is basically the main opinion. Now, this kind of disagreement doesn't exist that much anymore. It was more right after the Arizal for a good amount of time until the Baal Shem Tov, where there was this debate, how do we understand the Tzimtzum? Is it literal or not literal? So Rav Ginsburg is just trying to apply it to the idea of compromise. And from compromise, you get peace. And so if God totally withdrew from the space of finite worlds, then it's harder to envision the idea of God being everywhere simultaneously. That God is within every point of space and every moment of time. This was actually, according to Chassidut, this was Yaakov's epiphany after his dream of the ladder, where he said, God was in this place and I didn't know. In other words, my concept of God was like, God is like up there someplace, and I can relate to him and he relates to the world, but he's kind of out there. But then Yaakov realized that God was in this place, meaning literally that God is in space, God is in place, he's in time. Everything is God. Ein od milvado. That was Yaakov's revelation. And so Rav Ginsburg is comparing it to an attitude of compromise. Is that if we see the world as dualistic, right and wrong, you or me, then that's how a person sees the world. And there's very little room for compromise. Rav Ginsburg was saying that the first quality of a leader is the world view that we have to be able to see truth in many, many different ways and dimensions. Now, I want to end with one last point that Rav Ginsburg makes, and that is that having learned all this about compromise and making peace and willingness to give up what you want for the sake of another person. So he says it's all well and good, but not when it comes to the Torah. In other words, when it comes to the Torah, we have red lines. We can stretch ourselves. We can find ways to call it the gray area of halacha, but we don't make peace by transgressing the Torah. That's not peace. And we know the quote that the Torah is called the tree of life. V'chol netivoteha shalom. All of its pathways are ways of peace. So I'm going to end with a story. Some of you might know this. Some of you might have seen even the video. It really had a profound effect on me. I'll try to tell it quickly. It's a great, true story. It's a story of Rivka Ravitz. Rivka Ravitz at the time was a daughter of a Knesset member, a religious Knesset member from Agudat Yisrael, and her father was a Knesset member. And when she graduated high school, she was very, very smart, very capable. So he added her to his staff. So she started working in the Knesset as an 18-year-old. And then the Knesset passed a law that a Knesset member cannot hire a family member to be part of their staff, which makes sense because then everyone would just, uncles, aunts, cousins, you name it. So anyways, she couldn't continue to work for him. At the time, there was another Knesset member named Ruby Rivlin, who, because of his connection, he was part of the Likud, and he saw that she was very capable. He took her as part of his staff. To make a long story short, Ruby Rivlin became president of Israel. She ended up being his chief of staff. Also, in the meantime, she had 12 children. Now, this is quite an accomplishment. She had 12 children and was chief of staff for the president of Israel. The president of Israel was invited to meet the Pope. And of course, a president doesn't go by themselves. They go with a whole delegation. And of course, he goes with his chief of staff. Okay, so they go and they get to the Vatican, and the Vatican, in preparation, says, there's very strong emphasis on ritual here. And to meet the Pope, there's very strict protocol. Part of the protocol is everyone shakes hands with the Pope. So immediately, Rivka Ravitz knows there's a problem. She's very religious, and she does not touch a man's hand. And the president of Israel realized this was a problem. So they worked out that one of the people on the Vatican staff would tell the Pope beforehand, and then he would understand, and there wouldn't be any like political fallout that someone's refusing to take the hand of the Pope. Okay, it comes time for the actual meeting, and the person from the staff who was supposed to have told the Pope did not tell the Pope. And it's like minutes before, and he comes over to Rivka Ravitz and says, I'm so sorry, but I can't get in there now. I'm not allowed. I forgot to tell him. So they go in, and the whole delegation is shaking hands with the Pope. So the president of Israel goes first, and he shakes the hand of the Pope. And there's a whole video of this. You could probably find it on YouTube. And it was videoed. And so the president of Israel said, not confidentially, but not that everyone could hear it, said, the woman behind me is my chief of staff. She is a married woman with 12 children, and she's very religious, and she doesn't touch another man. So I hope you'll understand. And then it came her turn, and the Pope, and there's a video of this, the Pope bowed down to her. He bowed down to her in like honor of her standing by her beliefs. It was quite amazing, but it gets more amazing. Wait for this one. So then they're invited to the White House. And this is, I believe, right at the beginning of President Biden's presidency, at the very end of Ruby Rivlin's presidency. It was his last trip. Again, they go. We have the same problem here. But it's not like the pomp and circumstance of the Pope, but it's still there's ways that things are done. So the same thing happens. President Rivlin says to President Biden, my chief of staff here is a religious woman, and she has 12 children, and she doesn't shake hands. I hope you'll understand. And so again, this is on video. President Biden says, 12 children? You have 12 children? He got down on his knee in recognition for Rivka Ravitz. Like, astounding. So this is just a story, and there are many stories like this, that the world respects a Jew who doesn't compromise on their basic beliefs, on their red lines, and what they conceive of is the halacha. So this is the point Rav Ginsburg was making, is that we don't transgress the Torah in order to make other people happy. He says that's not bringing peace to the world. What's bringing peace to the world is living by the Torah, because the Torah itself is called peace. That is what will bring peace to the world. So I'll bless all of us to know how to make peace within ourselves, between all of our dueling parts of our personality, that we know how to make it in the home, shalom bayit, among friends, among neighbors, and we all look forward and pray for a time when the whole world will learn to live in peace, and will learn that through the ability to see more than just their side, and to see that we can be unique and different and still come to a sense of peace. May it be soon and in our day.